I want to welcome all of you to today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us. Considerations for the use of AI in creating plain language clinical trial results summaries. I'm Ken Getz, and I'm the founder of SysScript, and I'm a professor at the Tufts University School of Medicine, and I'll be moderating our webinar discussion today. I want to personally apologize for some of the tech difficulties that we had last week. We're so delighted to have you join us today. I'm also delighted to be having three colleagues join us today, each of them experts in their own right in clinical trial transparency. So I'm joined by Sudipta Chakraborty, clinical trial transparency lead at Biogen, Gosha Stoltzener, director of clinical trial transparency patient engagement at AstraZeneca, and Julie Holtzappel, who's an independent consultant and a clinical trial transparency thought leader. We are really looking forward to a very lively discussion today. We'll be actually recording this webinar and sharing it publicly, and I'll tell you more about that at the end of our discussion today. I also wanted to let you know that as part of this lively discussion, we invite you to submit your comments and questions. If you can please use the question and answer feature in this Zoom platform, we'll moderate and monitor those comments and questions, and then we'll offer them up to our panel members to answer later in our webinar today. I'd like to just begin with a couple of quick opening remarks. I'm sure I speak for the vast majority of you joining the webinar today that the introduction of AI in clinical research has been rapid and it has been dramatic. We are seeing a large number of AI applications, most notably in routine labor and time-intensive activities being deployed and used within clinical research. And of course, the Trump administration's recent announcement that the US government will be dedicating $500 billion to AI infrastructure in the coming years. All of these kinds of investments, no doubt, accelerate AI and generative AI use and applications. The goal or goals of today's webinar are to talk about the impetus behind the formation of a multi-stakeholder working group that is looking at the use of AI specifically in creating plain language clinical trial results summaries. This multi-stakeholder group has drafted a considerations document, and we're going to be talking about that document today and its rationale. And another purpose of today's webinar is to raise awareness and to invite and stimulate comments and feedback about this draft considerations document. So to that end, if we could go to the next slide, we're going to be asking you to submit your comments formally onto the SysScript website, and you can use the QR code. You can also use the approach that's offered on the website itself to submit your comments formally. We'll be closing the public comment period on February 18th. There's also an important video available that will offer you insight into how to provide general comments, as well as how to provide comments line by line as you go through the considerations document. So I just want to point you to that video if you'd like to review those instructions. All of this can be accessed on the SysScript website and through the use of that QR code as well. So let's now begin by just looking at a couple of poll questions so that we can get a feel for who's joined us today. So we'll pull up that first poll question. And here we just want to understand what category best describes the stakeholder group that you're in. So if you could just take a moment to click on the appropriate item or choice. Do we have the results of the poll as well? We do. So it looks like our largest group, as expected, would be our transparency and disclosure professionals. And coming in second are the medical writers in our group as well. We had nearly 100 people register for the webinar today. Completing our survey, we have about 30 people. Let's go to the second poll question. And this one gets a little bit closer to your familiarity, your comfort level using large language model AI to draft text. So if you could just spend a moment to choose the item that most reflects your level of use. Great. Let's look at the results for that question as well. So obviously our largest group is use of large language model AI to draft text for other purposes. A little more than 10% of you have used it for plain language summaries specifically. And a fairly large percentage, over a third of you, have said you have not yet used this AI support to draft text. So this will be a good and rich discussion that will have relevance to those of you with more familiarity and those of you that are really just considering use as well. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Julie, who's just going to provide some background about the multi-stakeholder working group. So Julie, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Ken. Can you hear me okay?
We hear you fine.
Perfect. So I want to start out by thanking the members of our working group. This group is over a year old now. We celebrated our 1-year birthday last week when we met. The goal of the group was to come together to provide a forum to exchange ideas and learnings, and ultimately to develop considerations for responsible use of AI in creating lay summaries. It's been a year of interesting discussion and collaboration to get us to where we are today. So thank you to all the working group members. And let's look a little bit about the activities that have taken place over the past year. So after forming the working group, we spent a lot of time discussing the scope and ensuring we had a clear charter. And we also spent time looking at the landscape of what was out there in the space of plain language summaries. After that, in April, we started working on an outline, and we spent a lot of time getting the outline correct and really making sure that that was detailed for all the aspects we wanted to consider. We made sure we had some experienced subject matter experts in the group, including trying to find folks that had looked at using AI in creation of plain language summaries. Then we used the outline we developed to draft the document, and we spent time reviewing and revising the document. We landed on the title of considerations, and we actually spent a lot of time talking about considerations versus guidelines, etc. And we've now gone to public comment with this document. As Ken mentioned, you can easily reach the page with the document and provide comments using the QR codes and the links provided. The public comment period runs through February 18th, and after that, we plan to finalize our considerations document and publish and share that, hopefully within the next few months. So that's the plan. That's where we are today. We're excited to be here and to talk about what we've done. So Ken, I will turn it back to you to jump into our panel discussion today.
Perfect. So let's pull up all of our panel members. So Sudipta and Gosha, you'll join us as well. And I just want to ask as a first question, maybe Gosha, for you to start, why even create a multi-stakeholder working group? Why was that necessary?
Thank you, Ken, for this question and for organizing this webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. So basically, this group was established as a response to the challenges faced by the industry in late 2023, beginning of 2024, and concerns when AI was extensively used to generate plain language summaries of results without proper controls in place. And as we could remember, this was a real concern, as throughout many years, sponsors have put a lot of their efforts into establishing robust processes and practices to deliver results for patients in a right and responsible way. Sponsors also worked closely together to build best practices around the framework, around the authoring and delivery of those materials to patients, as well as had to follow it. So when the industry started to experience seeing plain language summaries created by AI on a broad scale without human review, this raised very valid concerns about data integrity, overall writing style, errors, usability for the intended audience. So basically, the main focus of this group was to build a document that would provide guidelines and elements for considerations on how to use AI in a responsible way, how to integrate it in the framework in a responsible manner, and making it a useful technology that would assist human and not substitute them.
Sudipta, I want to bring you in now. It sounds like a bit of a balancing act, being able to accommodate a powerful new tool, but also to overlay a responsible use. Can you talk a bit about the multi-stakeholder group and how you were able to manage that kind of balance?
Absolutely. I think one of the benefits of having a multi-stakeholder group, right, is we have multiple perspectives at play. Coming up with recommendations like this with so many opinions in the group can oftentimes be challenging, but it's so important because we each came with our own level of comfort with AI, own level of experience. As we saw in the poll questions, right, it seems like a good majority of people still haven't really used it for PLS. And I can personally say I haven't really used it yet in a way that feels comfortable and works with our current processes. So I think having so many different perspectives, levels of experience really helped us put together something that really comes out balanced based on what our current landscape is in the PLS space.
Great. So Julie, let me pull you in now. What, given this tall task, what were some of the guiding principles that, and frameworks, if you will, that guided the multi-stakeholder development of a considerations document?
It's a great question, and it was something that was important for us to align on as we got started. So one of the big things was that we acknowledged we were not recreating the wheel of the established standards that are out there. So there's a couple guiding agreed best practices we have in the Good Lay Summaries guide that's been out there for many years, and the standards that have been established and are compliant in that best practices guide under the EU CTR Annex 5. So we all agreed those baselines of what we do and how we do it and roles are the foundation. And the second piece was also realizing that we can't ask AI to replace human expertise, especially on the science piece. And I think Gosha hit a little bit on our experience with that in what we saw in 2023. And then the last thing that we all agreed is that we know that this is an evolving space and that there are unknowns, and this will continue to evolve and best practices will continue to exchange. So those were really three foundational principles that we all aligned on.
Let me invite the other panel members. Knowing that it's an evolving document, did that make it easier to come up with an initial set of considerations, knowing that over time, as we gain experience, it will evolve?
Yeah, I think the evolution of AI in itself, right, is something that brings a lot of fear. I'm not someone who is tech savvy by any means, and I think even for myself, I don't truly understand just what all is possible out there. So when we first started working as a group, I think there were a lot of silences at first. What do we feel comfortable saying? What is it going to be in terms of the scope of this set of recommendations, knowing that the entire industry still is not really at any type of standard with AI. So we went in with a really open mind, with knowing that we are going to have to evolve the document itself over time based on how AI changes.
Can I now ask you to comment on why have a public comment period? Why is that important to the evolution of a considerations document?
Sure. So I think we have found, and I always feel this is extremely prevalent in the clinical trial transparency and disclosure space, that the ability to work as a group and bring together best practices makes the strongest solutions. And we saw that with GLSP and with many other things that we've done. And so we knew we wanted to continue that spirit of collaboration in what we were doing here. We wanted, through this process, to make sure that everybody has a chance to share their experience, their lessons learned, and what they see as the right path forward. And so it's particularly important during this comment period that we're ensuring we're bringing in the perspective of AI experts, as well as those that have been doing the development of plain language summaries for a very long time, and that ultimately what we publish has usefulness to it. And to do that, you really need a variety of input from stakeholders across the spectrum. So we tried to do that with the working group, but we know we have a bigger opportunity with the comment period, and that's really what's important to us here.
So let's now move to the considerations themselves. And maybe, Gosha, if you could kick us off, what can you describe one of the core considerations and give us a little bit of a characterization of that consideration as well?
Absolutely. So in my view, one of the key elements that we discussed in this document is basically the necessity of research staff to be involved into the process of development of plain language summaries of results. And why? Because sponsors subject matter experts not only own the data, but also have a deep understanding of objectives, design, endpoints, and all of the statistical analysis and all of the scientific nuances that come into play. And subject matter experts' insights into complexity of the trial, I would say, enable to align plain language summary with the scientific nuances, as I said, of the trial, and thereby are able to address the needs of patients. I think also that sponsors' engagement in the process ensures, in that respect, accurate interpretation of complex technical details and data, and facilitates the creation of summaries in understandable manner, while at the same time, which is also of huge importance, maintaining scientific accuracy.
That's great. Sudipta, how about you? What can you describe another consideration and give us a little bit of a flavor for the thought process that went into creating it?
Sure. So I think a really big one, and we've kind of already touched on this from the other panelists too, is really that humans still have to stay in the loop. We all know that probably one of the concerns that people have is, will this take over my job? Will this take over what I do? And that's a concern that I think is even beyond our industry. So in this situation for a PLS, that can't really be the case. It's really something, kind of as Gosha said, that has to complement your current PLS process and not necessarily take over current steps. For example, one of the things that we talk about in our considerations is maybe AI can be helpful for something like creating an initial draft of your PLS document. But then once you get past that, it gets tricky when you get into stakeholders reviewing the document, providing comments, going back and forth between different perspectives, having those comments come in and editing the document. That's really where humans have to step back into play in the process, which is how most current processes are for most people. And I think the bigger one for me personally, coming from a health literacy background, coming from a patient centricity perspective too, is that we can't lose a good best practice that we have now, which is that we want patients and the public to have involvement in these documents, involvement in the creation of templates, involvement in the review of these documents. And that feedback is so critical because AI alone can't give those perspectives to us. Cultural competency, just general ideas that AI wouldn't be able to give the same way that someone from the general public could give us.
Great. Julie, over to you.
Sure.
Another consideration.
You know, one of my favorites, data privacy. So as we built out the right way to create plain language summaries from the beginning, we always knew that we were dealing with aggregated data and we needed to make sure we kept it at that level. Same principles apply here. We have to make sure that during this process, it's designed to respect data privacy. And that includes both the outputs as well as the inputs. So we must also make sure that the development of the AI tool and the models is respecting privacy as well and not holding any individual patient level data. And I think the big thing is we already have standards for what reporting in groups looks like. A lot of people look at that, you know, groups of 11 or more kind of standard that comes from some of what EMA and Health Canada have put out there in other places of anonymization. Safe side groups remains important, and that means that really small studies are going to be tricky, and that's not going to change with AI. And so we have to keep that at the forefront. And again, this leverage existing best practices really comes into play here.
Let me open it up to all of the panelists. Any other considerations that you want to mention?
I think something else that's really important to talk about is transparency. Obviously, a lot of the people on this call are in the world of transparency. And so in the true spirit of transparency, how we use AI is something that's really important to disclose. I think a lot of the mistrust or the skepticism that is out there right now comes from the fact that people, don't really understand AI yet, but they also are worried that it's being used in ways that they don't really know in their day-to-day lives. So if you think about that with the PLS and authoring, our guidelines, our recommendations have a lot of examples of the best ways of when and where and how you should be disclosing that use. And I think one of the really awesome parts of this recommendation too is that we actually have example disclosure statements that you can use in your PLS document that really helps the reader understand how AI was actually used to create the document.
When it comes to other considerations, I think that one of the key elements that comes at the top, I would say it's ensure that we can build trust. And I think that it's really important to understand that plain language summaries of results are not only legally required and formally required documents in EU, right? But they are also consistently listed in patients' insight surveys as one of the elements, information patients would like to receive and are interested in. So these summaries are really valued by clinical trial participants. And this means it's our responsibility to provide them with clear and scientifically accurate information presented in easy to understand format. So I guess that recognizing these factors is ethically our responsibility, right? As a sponsors, to ensure that AI-generated documents are subjected to human review to eliminate any risks of bias or inaccuracies. And I guess this is also what Sudipta has mentioned. We should also be transparent when it comes to technology being used. And I guess these are the key elements that will help us build trust and confidence in pharmaceutical industry and show that we are not choosing to go easy way, but we are really committed to provide patients with accurate information, and it's our aim to keep them informed and engaged.
Great.
Thanks, Gosha. I think the other thing that I will highlight you can find in the document that we spent some time looking at is technology considerations. And again, you set the stage quite well, Kim, talking about the investment that's been committed recently and what's to come. We totally acknowledge this is going to be a rapid technology change, and the nature of AI, with it being sort of self-evolving, right? And that's the beauty and the risk, means that we must ensure there's good governance. And there's a lot out there about ethical AI governance, and we're not suggesting anything really unique for this particular area, other than ensuring there's human oversight in the overall governance of the system and the AI tools you build to support your organization in the creation of these plain language summaries. There's a lot of evolving regulatory landscape taking place, and that's going to continue to be reality for a long time. So keeping up with that is important, but also just making sure that the AI is being governed and that humans are looking after where it's going and what it's creating, and ensuring falsehoods are not coming out of the documents. And again, this is about keeping the humans in the loop ultimately on the output, but it's also about keeping the humans in the loop and governing the actual tool that we're using. And so we spent some time in that area, and we think this is a great area for comment in what everybody is seeing out there. So really hoping to get a lot of comments in this space.
So to that end, both for our webinar and ultimately for our draft considerations document, I really want to now encourage our audience, our attendees, to share any comments or questions for our panel members as just a start. So be thinking about that. And in the meantime, I just want to ask our panel members, as you look across all of the core considerations, are there any in particular where you're anticipating we'll see more comment than others? The considerations seem so thoughtful, so practical, but were there a few places where the working group really found it had to work through them quite extensively?
I mean, I'll seed one by saying that there was a lot of debate about, should this be focused on just plain language summaries as they're defined by the EU CTR, or should we go broadly and include plain language summaries of protocol synopsis, or broader in all of patient-centric communications? And we really had to work through that. And to sort of put that, where we landed and why we decided to focus on the plain language summaries of the clinical studies is because we do believe that there are specific considerations with different deliverables, and that's part of what this evolution in AI is going to bring. And so we wanted to start with a very specific scope and tackle where we know we have established standards. Plain language summary, protocol synopsis, those that have been trying know, I see Sudipta smiling too, we don't have those established standards of what it looks like when the humans are doing this effectively and repeatedly. And so to throw AI in the mix when you don't actually have standards is harder, right? Starting where you have standards and letting AI take them and use them and repeat them is what we felt to be a better starting place. So that was one of a long line of conversations and sort of the circle we went around and why we landed where we landed.
I'll just quickly add too. I think something that Julie touched on that we've talked about before too, with the open period for comments, is that this is really a living, breathing document. It will change over time, not just based on how AI is evolving, but as Julie said, going beyond the current scope as we adopt new standards for, as she said, something like a protocol PLS. So I think everyone should keep that in mind when they're providing their comments. This is not something that is just going to be set in stone the way that it is. And this is why your feedback is really crucial.
And Gosha, a question for you, and maybe this will stimulate panel discussion. How would you like to see organizations use this considerations document?
This is also something we've been speaking about, whether this should be a guideline, guidance, or considerations document. And we all agreed that we cannot force anyone to stick to particular rules and adopt it. What we can do, we can share our perspectives and provide elements to consider how to build a frameworks around the using AI tools and how to implement it in already existing guidelines used by sponsors in the process of creating trial result summaries of for patients. So I would say, please read it, comment on it, share your comments, share your feedback, do it with us, and in the future, take it as something you could consider in your framework as a best recommended practice, adopted to your needs as well.
I'm sure we're going to get this question anyway, but did the group consider using AI to actually draft a considerations document?
Yeah, that was another fun one, actually. So yes, we decided that we should take our own recommendations and see how they play out. But keep in mind, we weren't writing a plain language summary of clinical trials. So it was using the ideas and the best practices behind this idea that Sudeepta seeded, which was, we think that's really good for creating a first draft. And so we did do that. I actually had the fun of doing that for one section myself, taking the outline that we had built as a group, refining that specific to the section that I was supposed to write, filling in gaps of things that we wanted to make sure we had talked about that specifically were inferred, and seeing what that process of making sure it's in an outline looks like, building it out into a draft, refining that draft, and then taking that draft through the group review and integration process as well. And so we had different authors doing that for different parts of the document, and then we had to have a single author come and bring the voice together at the end. And so it was actually quite a fun experience. I really enjoyed that. And I think it really helped us get to that first draft really quickly. And so we were able to sort of confirm, I think, the belief that we all started with, which is there's a great opportunity here to expedite development of first drafts with good input material, and then make sure the humans are really working together to make a high quality final document come out of it.
Terrific. Sudeepta, I'm going to pass this one along to you to kick us off, but we have a question from our audience. The question is, how often did the working group meet, and how was the project managed? So as you developed the concepts and move forward, how did the working group interact?
Well, I believe we met monthly. And of course, a couple of months, it was hard to get people on calls, but we met as often as we could, which was usually monthly. It really started off, as I think Julie showed at the beginning, really establishing scope. I think that was honestly a more time-consuming part than I would have originally thought, but it was important to actually lay down kind of our own framework for what are we going to discuss in this document, what is outside of this document. Once we figured that out, it was a shared Word document that we were all going in, drafting sections based on our experiences and our areas of expertise. So everyone had a hand based on what they knew with AI or what their background was in. And then, similar to what I said earlier about human involvement, editing, incorporation of comments, the AI exercise that was used to create it, that's where it couldn't be used, right? This is when humans had to get involved. As Julie said, someone had to go in, make it all have one voice. So that's really how it was done. And it was led by our awesome colleagues at Syscript to run the show with the document, but it was a total group effort. And I really enjoyed every part of the collaboration.
Great. Gosha, I'm going to now invite you in. We have a question that asks, and it really builds on a comment you made earlier. Initially, when we came together, when the working group came together, some of the impetus was associated with concerns about recent events that had occurred. But over time, the question asks, did the dynamics change as you gain more experience with the process, as more people shared their views and a rational way to sort of frame how we work with AI as a tool? Can you comment on the dynamics in the working group and how they evolved over time?
Yes, absolutely. So at the beginning, we were all concerned, but at the same time, really happy that we could gather together and work together, because we clearly identified a space where there was a gap. There were missing guidelines, missing document, as we decided to call it, for considerations of using AI, with the AI technology coming into place. But as you mentioned, Ken, with time we started to gain more and more confidence. We're not solely working as sponsors, but also invited individuals engaged, right, with the technology, who gave us also some technical support, technical knowledge. So this was really important element of building this document together with others who have got the knowledge around that. So I think that finalizing the document, we felt quite confident what we have put there, and we knew that it's not supposed to be a document that will focus on technical aspects, but on elements that we've seen initially as something we felt a little bit insecure, but then creating that document, we knew that it's the right path forward to move with.
Did any of you expect to become experts in this area? Obviously, I think we all know that clinical trial transparency has elements that may be ripe for enablement through new solutions. So just an open question for all of the panel members. Did you ever imagine that you'd be at this point where you'd have more confidence and a comfort level with accommodating AI use?
What I can say from my side is that it was really joint effort, and I'm really happy that we could share our experience, our, let's say, vision, our opinions, and learn from each other. So from my side, it was also very good learning experience, gaining knowledge in also other aspects, not only, with respect to authoring part and ensuring that human is engaged in the review, but also looking at the regulatory landscape, so on and so forth. So very, very good experience.
I would echo Gosha here. I think personally, I was probably on one end of the spectrum of just being a little hesitant at first. I was one of those at the beginning, just unsure how this was going to fit into the health literacy, plain language space as a whole. But I think, as Gosha said, by going through this process with so many different perspectives and opinions, and then really having those AI SMEs come in and really give us that kind of background that I honestly didn't have, it was definitely more of a confidence builder that way. And so I feel less afraid than I did at the beginning.
And I definitely agree with Gosha and Sudipta. I think what is interesting here is that AI is coming and the efficiencies that come with it are critical. And so whilst the catalyst for this group may have been a version of fear, right? I think the outcome has been opportunity and taking forward this opportunity to make something better and to really acknowledge where we are and what it takes to get more high quality plain language summaries out in the world, right? And ultimately, that's the goal of everybody who's been, focused on driving the publication of plain language summaries for the past 10 years now. And so seeing this as opportunity versus fear has been a really pleasant sort of circle that we've gone through. I completely agree with Sudipta, the value of those that are leading the way and demonstrating how that can look effectively has been very much appreciated. And I think we're all at this point of, hey, this is a cool opportunity and what it can do for patients and getting clinical research out there more easily for everybody to understand, and hoping that this enables groups that haven't been able to do this, right? We know that big pharma has been focused on these for a while, but what about small pharma and academics and stuff? We need to make this easier, and that's what AI is here to do. And so I think we've all gone through this sort of journey of coming from the worry to the opportunity side, and that's been a really fun part of this and a really positive outcome for our group, I think.
Terrific. Let's pull up the closing slide with the QR code again. And first, I want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you for your perspectives. This was just a great overview. I want to point everyone to the QR code and the website, the web page with the links on it, and just really encourage more perspectives. As you heard, all of our panel members talked about how important it is to get those perspectives and to integrate it into this living document that we hope will be useful, that will be practical, and that will really provide the same level of confidence building that clearly those who were involved in its creation have really felt and articulated. So again, I really want to thank our panel members today for joining us. The webinar, as I mentioned at the outset, was recorded, and that recording will also be accessible on the SysGroup website. So again, thank you all so much, and look forward to receiving your formal comments and suggestions.